Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lee Cole, and I'm the volunteer co-chair for Region 1. My role tonight is to help facilitate the conversation and take you through the agenda for the evening. We have a few housekeeping items. We ask that you please keep your cameras on for the entirety of the meeting. Keep your microphones on mute until we get into the breakout room discussions. Use the chat function if you should have a question, and one of the other regional volunteers will assist in making sure that you're heard. Now, please bear in mind, we acknowledge that we may not have the answers to your particular questions in the chat, but we will make sure to get those answered for you. The first thing we'd like to do is to ask everyone to please help us exercise a little bit of grace. Everyone will have the opportunity to have their opinions heard and voice their opinions, but we want you to help us remain positive. We know that this has been a stressful year, and sometimes the conversations about facilities and planning for the future can also be stressful, but we want to remain positive and constructive. We once again acknowledge that when we do not have the answers right away, the questions will be documented in the chat by our student lead, Ms. Hanks, and then answered by district staff at a later time, and also compiled into a master FAQ document. Now tonight, we have the pleasure of having with us Scott Nelson and the Columbus City Schools Board of Education Vice President Ramona Reyes with us this evening. We also have representation from Liggett Architects, who are the planning consultants assisting in the process, and Mike Nicholson from Battelle Kids. Right now, I'm so pleased to introduce Vice President Reyes.
Good evening, community. Good evening to all of our partners, our families, our students. And again, I want to thank you for joining us today as we move to the next phase of the FMP Facilities Master Plan, the envisioning phase. So I am just here to thank you on behalf of the Columbus Board of Education for joining us in this important work. Continue to ask you to be present and provide us feedback so that we can ensure that we're doing and fulfilling the wants and needs of our children and the desires of our community. So we ask you, if you cannot participate tonight, to please make sure that you reach out to members of our team to let us know any feedback, any recommendations, advice that you may have as we continue through the FMP process. So again, thank you. And I am ready for tonight's event, and I want to currently introduce and turn this over to our Region 1 Area Superintendent, Scott Nelson.
Thank you, Vice President Reyes, and welcome everybody. It's great to see you again, and to just acknowledge and appreciate your time during a busy week, a little later than last time, and just that you're willing to make the investment and help us try to figure out the best way to serve our kids. And it's important. It's important what we're doing. So thank you very much. At this time, I would like to just say a few things about the Portrait of a Graduate. And we are going to be talking about this process in a little bit more depth. And the Portrait of a Graduate is the cornerstone of everything we do in the district and what we're going to be doing in the district, as we've been helped through this process with our partners from Battelle, community members, teachers, support staff, administrators, community members, community organizations, businesses. It's important because It is going to drive everything we do academically, in a social emotional sense for our kids, and with our facilities. And you'll see that here today in more depth as we move forward. The three pillars of our the portrait of a graduate are adaptability, communication, and global empathy. And instead of me trying to describe that to you, why don't we take a moment now to hear from our superintendent, Dr. Talisa Dixon, about this subject.
Now that we have a portrait of a graduate in place, then we as a district will have to stop doing some things that we were doing in the past. The portrait will be front and center. These are the 6 attributes that we are going to ensure that when our students graduate, that they are able to master. The first pillar is adaptability. To me, adaptability means how do our students interact in adverse environments. We are in a country now where there are so many different people from so many different places. The beauty of learning from one another and how we can solve those problems together. The next pillar is communication. How do we make sure that our students can express themselves? Our students have to be able to ask questions, ask for feedback, and really getting students to understand that your voice matters. The next pillar is creativity. Our students can come up with multiple ways of addressing our problems, and to learn and at their own pace, you have to create that space for creativity to happen. And it has to emerge, I believe, in that manner. The next pillar is critical thinking. It is important for my students to understand thinking about a problem in a very complex way starts to build those critical thinking skills, and it allows students to know that I don't have to have all the answers right now, but I can think about it and build upon what I believe the answer will be. The next pillar is global empathy. How do we get students to understand that what they may see happen to another student or even to their neighbor, how do we feel? How does that make us feel when we see injustice happening, when we see poverty happen? What does that feel like? And not just locally in Columbus, but around the world. We all should be using technology as a lever to advance our students' opportunities. We as an organization, we are going to use technology to make sure that students have access to curriculum wherever they are. We want to be a district that when our students graduate, they can demonstrate those 6 attributes. That's what's important to us right now, to make sure that our students have an opportunity to lead. We have to be student first. And I think that's where the magic happens, is that we're doing it not just for our students, we're doing it with our students, and student voice matters.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Pabin of Leggett Architects. I am part of the design and planning firm that has partnered with Columbus City Schools and the community to put together the facility master plan. On behalf of Columbus City Schools and the Board of Education, thank you for participating in the second session of your region's facility master plan community engagement discussions. The 5-step collaborative master plan process includes the phases gather, envision, define, consider, and transform. The community engagement process is a crucial part of creating the master plan. Each step of this process is to create consensus of community values and a full and clear understanding of the community's expectations and what they are for its future learning environments. Notice that the first 3 phases are problem defining and the second 2 are problem solving, meaning we are not designing anything. until we have gone through the steps to understand fully and clearly what is needed. The process started in April 2021 and is scheduled to be completed in December of 2021. Your input in these discussions will be the foundations of the facility master plan that will be reviewed by Columbus City Schools Board of Education, administration, and staff. Approval of the master plan is scheduled for March of 2022. In April, for the gather phase, we completed a survey, participated in regional community discussions, and the Facility Master Plan Committee convened to discuss the successes and barriers to learning in your existing school buildings. There were many items that were revealed in the discussions relating to what is working or not within Columbus City Schools. This month is the Envision phase. The second phase of the process starts the discussions of how the successes can be elevated and the barriers can be addressed within your schools. The discussions you will be having later tonight in the Zoom breakout rooms for the Envision phase will lead to a program of space and place within the schools. This program will be used to start establishing the master plan concepts in the future community discussions starting in the fall of 2021. This master plan phase is to envision your goals and aspirations for your future learning environments. Additionally, this is the time in the process for all of us to understand the purpose and the mission of Columbus City Schools. Together, we will imagine how that purpose can be transformed into place. Some of these items to keep in mind as you enter your breakout rooms are highlighted here. Establish goals and expectations, develop an understanding of your culture, explore your mission and how it can embody place. And as we have just seen in the video, we understand that will be through the vision and the mission of a portrait of a graduate. And finally, imagine the future potential of your district. In this presentation, you will see a series of images and concepts. In the breakout room discussion this evening, I encourage you to also reflect on what you see and how they may or may not be successful to respond to the issues raised in the gather phase, as well as the questions issued for discussion. Also, as we move forward with the presentation, you will see a pop-up question during each of the Portrait of a Graduate pillars. Please respond and we will make the results part of the data compilation for the Envision phase. The final component of the Envision phase is to issue a survey at the end of the month that will include formal information shared tonight. This will allow additional community input for those who could not attend this evening. In the gather phase, we issued the survey prior to the discussion because we thought that the survey could help the discussion. For this particular discussion, we felt that the content, the viewing of the content would help lead to a more thorough response to the survey.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Nicholson. I'm with Battelle for Kids. And as you might have heard, Battelle for Kids partnered with Columbus City Schools to work with the school district and the community to develop its Portrait of a Graduate. So I'm just going to try and connect a couple dots as we see them. The Portrait of a Graduate represented an important shift for the schooling of the kids in the city. It represented a local decision to broaden the notions of success beyond what they historically, with regard to content acquisition, or sometimes known as the 3 R's. And this very likely has implications for its facilities. The expectations of the 3 R's might have gotten away with having more rigid institutional learning environments, but that may not be the case going forward. Since we have more dynamic outcomes that we're expecting from our kids, that probably presumes more dynamic facilities to help support that type of learning. As you know, the teachers can't make kids learn, but what the teachers and educators do is set the conditions that make learning more probable. And if we want to give the teachers as many tools as we can to make that more likely to happen, we probably need more flexibility in our structures. The rigid structures of the past probably won't do it. So we're looking to rebalance the characteristics in our facilities. What do we want rigid versus flexible in terms of structures, closed versus open spaces, natural light versus artificial light, a compliant type of feel to the surroundings, or an empowering feel to the surroundings. These are the type of things I think we need to consider as we look at the facility needs of Columbus going forward. Next slide, please. Probably among the most important of those characteristics is the flexibility of those spaces. Again, we want to give the educators as many tools as possible to create the conditions that are most likely to elicit the learning that we want in the kids. If we look at 21st century, what I'll say motivation, if we look at the contemporary scholarship and research on motivation, one of the biggest predictors of motivation is the feeling of autonomy, the feeling that we have control over our short and long-term fates. We probably want to ask ourselves, do the facilities, do they give clues or give cues out about, is it inviting to be autonomous, or does it feel like it's more contrived, more compliant feeling? These are among the considerations that we want to consider or ponder as we think about the facility needs of Columbus going forward. Dennis, is it back to you?
Yes, it is, Mike. Thank you very much. Now, stemming off of that, talking about where schools came from. In the 19th century, classrooms can be described as sparsely decorated or furnished, reflecting the frugality of the mostly rural times. All of the grades were taught in a single room by a single school teacher. The teacher was often younger than some of the students. Studies primarily focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic, as Mike just mentioned, as well as good manners. Resources were extremely limited, usually consisting of a few books, slate, and chalk. During the Industrial Revolution, the percentage of people working in agriculture plummeted as farms were gobbled up by agricultural business and people were forced to work in towns or cities. Owners of the industries that were now needing the workforce needed the schools to look like their workforce. Schools were designed and organized like the factories that these students were someday going to employ. As our classrooms evolved from supporting agrarian and industrial model classrooms, spaces had to continue to evolve to support the technology-based, creative, and critical thinking society and the model of collaboration. Along with the changes in physical attributes of a school came changes in a social construct of what a school is and what it means to a community. Equality and diversity before were merely just words, where today those words are embraced and celebrated within the school community. This master plan is the preeminent opportunity to develop the children of our community into global citizens who can thrive and lead to create the changes of our future. As mentioned earlier about the Envision phase, the purpose of today is review the goals and mission of Columbus City Schools. Our guiding principle to achieve these objectives is the Columbus City Schools Portrait of a Graduate. For the Envision phase, we will explore 3 pillars and discuss how they can be shaped in the future of our school facilities. The 3 pillars we will explore this evening are adaptability, communication, and global empathy. The definitions are as presented by Columbus City Schools. These 3 pillars were specifically selected for this month's discussion because they lend themselves to more conceptual conversation. The other 3 pillars will be discussed at the defined discussions next month because they are more specific and technical in nature. Adaptability. Our students will be agile in thoughts and actions, responding productively to positive and negative feedback while balancing diverse views and reach workable solutions. Well, what does this mean in educational design? We think of agility, education without walls, with movable, adjustable furniture and rooms. Not only the idea of flexible space, but the ability to achieve flexible space easily and efficiently. And then diverse spaces, introverted and extroverted places for individual, small group, and large group learning, meaning that we provide different educational environments for different learning opportunities for different learners. Creating adaptable space can be achieved within the walls of existing schools. You can see that the large windows that were provided in this existing older facility provide a maximum amount of daylight. Desks and chairs are on rollers for various space configurations and providing different opportunities for achieving the activities of the day. You can see the teacher has one student and then the rest of the students are working together on a project, and then the room can be reconstructed quickly to accommodate another, whatever program that they would like to have for that classroom. Another component of agility and adaptability within space is movable walls and relationship between spaces. You can see that the controllability of the space is easily modified between where the technology is presented, how the size of the group can be presented to, the configuration of the room, the acoustics of the room, all need to be easily adjusted for the amount of people that are going to be in a space and how that space will be used. Here we have a classroom setting for an elementary school in action. And this is the epitome of what specialized learning can be. You can see that there is a group of students who need the teacher's help and need the teacher's attention, while there's some students that are wanting to finish their work outside of the classroom and not be disrupted have that opportunity. And you see the overhead doors and the lighting and the technology, all of this is controlled by a push of a button. So it's agile in the sense that the room configuration and the choices of the classroom can be chosen efficiently and effectively. This is the same room from the opposite direction. You can see that the students working outside and the space that's provided for the students to have the opportunity for their individualized or small group learning opportunities. And plus, with the proximity of the classrooms next to each other, the opportunity for collaboration and project-based learning is at its highest function. Here's our first poll question of the evening. Do you believe learning should occur outside of the classroom? Now we have some diverse spaces. The space that you see here serves as its circulation, its cafeteria, its mobile library, and the assembly space. So down below, at times we provided additional storage so the library can be wheeled in, wheeled out. They have their assembly space when they need to address the entire elementary levels that you see here. And then this is also a place where they eat. It's occupying a smaller square footage, but also serving many diverse functions. Another aspect about diversity in design is corridors. They can be used so much more than just guiding students from one space to another. Diverse furnishings allow for social exchanges, privacy, but feel part of the collective, meaning as you are walking through this portion of the building from one area to the next, you have an opportunity to exchange with your classmates. But if you need a chance to have a little introspective timeout, we provide that opportunity as well. Something that was mentioned in the gather phases was about having the wellness of students and the opportunity to decompress. Having a simple, quiet, soft spot in a corridor can accommodate that sort of idea. Spaces that are opportunistic. You can see this is part of a classroom between windows and between the bookshelves. So you have the utilitarian functions, and then you have a quiet respite place for kids to calm down, read a book, relax, while the class being away from the noise in the central part of the classroom. If they don't want to be part of the collective, they have an opportunity to be part of the individual. Now on to communication. Our students will be effectively express thoughts and ideas using oral, written, and nonverbal skills while being active listeners to decipher meaning and attention. So what does this mean for educational design? We have expressive that set the stage for sharing information on a stage and in class and online without boundaries. So we have the ability to provide spaces that can speak to the whole in a larger format. And then we have the focused, the inspired listening, absorbing information in a more quiet environment with less distractions. An expressive idea is an auditorium. They can be reflective of the traditional values. We understand that a lot of auditorium spaces can be ornate or can be modern or very sophisticated in their design to represent the group that is reflective of the users of the space. This particular auditorium was unique in the sense that it was actually reduced in size so they can use this group for a larger presentation. And then on the other side, they have a smaller little amphitheater space that they can address a smaller group. From a static space, we have a more flexible space. The area has its presentation to the cafeteria and the visual connection so the students can see through the facility to understand what is going on. So the visual connection is the communication, and also how the floor communicates to the students and where they want to go. The students love this aspect, so they have their directions of how they're going and where they're going, and having the opportunity to meet another group of friends around the corner. Another expressive way is taking teaching outside of the classroom for providing different opportunities to claim their learning for themselves. Something that Mike mentioned was the idea of empowerment and developing a trust between the students and the staff. So the students have an opportunity to work with themselves. The teacher, if needed, has a setting for a small group to have a discussion to get a better understanding of the individual needs of that one particular student. But then there's also opportunities for presentation and communication. In this area in the back where you see the graph, that's a little mini amphitheater. So students have an idea have an opportunity to have their lessons and their what they're trying to achieve and express it to a larger group and get that experience of oral presentation. The other ideas of expressive communication is through complexity of spaces, the layers of information. Think about the work environments that we are usually in. It's not a traditional 1970s classroom where you have 4 walls, a window, and a door. You have these interactions of all these different people in all these different places and get an understanding of what they're doing and how what they're doing can influence what you're doing. And so there's this communication of activity through the different components of how we can design space. And then, as we also talked about, and feedback that we got in the Gather presentations and discussions, was the idea of the individualized space. The fact that the communication has to be brought down, if needed, for a student to participate in either individualized learning or have a teacher express a couple of different avenues of learning and education through individualized spaces. We provide, and this is more of those individualized quiet spaces and creating the comfort so the students can express themselves. And one of the parts that I love about this picture, you notice that no one's wearing shoes. So it's the idea of creating a comfort so the students can really communicate at their optimum level. And now focus communication. Oh, here we go. The next question that we have: do you believe it is important to support diverse learning styles with a variety of learning environments? The idea of this space, that the reason we're showing this is that when it comes to focus communication, the idea is control. That the users of the space, of a focused communication space, is that you can control the lighting, you can control the technology, you control your seating, you can control how people interact with the people passing by. You can roll up the shades, you can make it a quiet, dark, confined space, or you can have an idea for people that can come in and out and have open conversations and dialogue as needed throughout. And this is, again, more of a tie to modern work facilities. Instead of just the silos that we're in, we have an idea of communicating across in different ways through different spaces. But we also know we need to provide the focused technical communication. You notice that the room in the background is the larger classroom that is tied into this smaller workspace in front. We understand that there are some technical avenues that will require specialized attention, But just because you have more space doesn't necessarily mean you have more staff or faculty. So you provide the opportunity for a teacher to occupy or help students in different circumstances and in different environments, but still be in very close proximity that they don't have far to go to connect to their students. Again, the idea of control and comfort and connection. This is about intimate conversations to provide the avenues that people can be amongst, again, the idea of being amongst the group, but can be in a controlled discussion. And you can see the three types of communication in one space for various types of interaction. You have the different furniture, you have the different lighting, and then the direct connection to the circulation. Again, back to the opportunity for impromptu communication, not just secluding conversation and communication in one, that they have access to the group if they so choose. And then the opportunity for student-staff connection. This may look like just a standard conference room, but this is one of the most used rooms in this school facility because this conference room is specifically designed at the main intersection of two corridors. So it provides opportunity for students to use, staff and students to use, and have different sorts of communication. One of the components that we also heard from the gathered discussions was the idea of teacher well-being. And one of the ideas to promote teacher well-being is communication amongst themselves without having to traverse the entire school. So providing these spaces that allow for quick, comfortable communication helps everybody in the environment of the school communicate clearly, communicate effectively, and if necessary, communicate quickly. And then lastly, what we'll discuss tonight is the global empathy pillar. Our students will value and engage diverse cultures and unique perspectives through mutual respect and open dialogue while taking action to make the world more equitable and inclusive. And from our perspective, when we think about educational design, we think of welcoming. Of course, that means every student, every person is comfortable and has ownership of their school. And the other idea in educational design is the idea of sustainable. We understand that sometimes this could be a buzzword and not necessarily something that people latch onto, but it's the idea of having environmental understanding and responsibility for what human interaction does to the natural world around us. It's creating understanding and empathy for the world around that all of us are involved in together. So the welcoming aspect, and in this picture, creating historical context. It's an introduction to the sense of place that, yes, this is an older building, but we understand where we need to go for the future. And empathy for the past. Just because it's old doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. So using the facility around you to create the warmth and understanding of where we're going, but also getting to tell the story of where you've been. Another component that we discussed in the gather sessions was that I believe the words that were used were the schools are a beacon of the neighborhood. So when thinking about the welcoming aspects of schools, how does this fit in with the neighborhood? What kind of statement is this making for the community? In this particular one, you see the different textures, the different materials, the idea of walking through the past. So you know there's a connectivity in the different aspects and the different areas of this building that are easily accessible and that can be understood of why we want to be here and what this building is doing to help the neighborhood around you. Another component of welcoming is the sense of ownership. And again, we talked about this with the inside space, but when you look at the space and create a welcoming environment, this building not only just says an early learning center, so you know our little friends are learning here, but the little blue door on the side. You can see that the kids that come here, they're so proud of this because this door was made for them. Since you walk in the space, you understand that these kids have a sense of pride and ownership of what this building means to them and what it means to their neighborhood and their community around them. And then something else that really struck me during our gather discussions were the idea of understanding and celebrating the cultural differences. There are so many people from so many different places, and how do we celebrate that? What are the aspects and celebrating the differences between us. And in this particular case, it's music. They talked about a lot of different needing for specific music spaces, and just that idea of celebrating the music of everyone's background and providing a space for that allows understanding and helps understanding of different people in your community. The last component that we'll be talking about before we have our final question for the evening. Do you feel it is important? It is important connection to the global environment is included in education. This picture has a connection to nature, not only from the visual, the textural, and the colors, but just an understanding of where this stuff comes from, the things that we have on the inside. Where do we get it? Why do we design with these colors? Why do we design? And then we actually have the visual connection outside to nature. So there's an understanding of why we design what we design actually connects to the world around us. Outdoor learning was something that was discussed quite a bit in the Gather presentations and the Gather discussions, but we need to create a sense of place for it. This is also an idea for teacher respite, the idea of having the teachers come out and have an outside place outside of their building that they can talk, and then providing the technology and the provisions so they can have a conversation. I remember when I was a little kid, and the idea of going outside was we were sitting in a circle on a soccer field, little kids were pulling at the grass. It didn't really do anything. We were just sitting out in the grass. But if you provide the designated outdoor learning component, the outdoor components to promote learning and promote communication and promote discussing themselves, they really become successful places. And then a connection to the outside. There are opportunities for how students work can connect to nature. These garage doors that you see here, they're not, and this is a STEM lab. Not only is the lab where you're understanding different natural components and the biological components and natural components, but you can actually have a way outside that connects you to what you're learning about. This and that lab is also connected to a greenhouse, so that's what ties it in. And then with outdoor and sustainable and natural surroundings, you make it look like the outside. Promote awareness of what you are doing with your facility. The idea that it's made of wood, where does the wood come from? How does it look? How does it feel? And the visual, again, the visual connection to the outside. And then the understanding of human interaction can help. The idea of urban farming and the farm to table. Some of the discussions that we had in the Gather phase were that there were some food deserts within some of the neighborhoods of Columbus City Schools. But how does the student interaction affect how that food is produced and distributed? So it's really a correlation of cause and effect, and the fact that students can make a difference. It's that understanding that what I'm doing here makes a difference is the important part, and that's where the empathy comes tying in. And then these areas being student-led, again, the idea of accountability and control for the students and a wellness approach. So these student-run spaces, so if they see that I created this, this food is edible and delicious because I helped create it, that sense of ownership is really a component of what can be seen within some of these natural spaces that promote the sustainable portions of how we get our food. And then the interaction with the natural environment. So designing these spaces to be within the natural environment. Going back again to the connection of why is this important? So we can talk about outdoor learning all we want, but the idea of being immersed in it and having an understanding of why we are doing this, because it's important, and why is it important, and what does it mean to be empathetic to the natural world around us. Thank you very much. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I really appreciate your attention, and we would love to have you take some of the reactions of what you've seen back to your discussions. So that is the conclusion of my portion. And with that, I will hand it back to the regional co-chairs. Lee?
Thank you so much, Dennis, and Patel for Kids for that incredible presentation. Now, for everyone, I want to remind you that the purpose of this community discussion is to review the 3 pillars of the portrait of a graduate. That is adaptability, communication, and global empathy, and how these pillars can be translated into our school facility spaces. So as you reflect on the presentations that you have just seen, how did you respond to the images that were presented tonight? What images resonated with you and why? So as we move into our breakout discussions, we have 3 very specific questions for you to deliberate on. 1, how can corridors and cafeterias become adaptable and agile learning spaces? 2, what kinds of flexible furniture are needed to improve and focus communication in the classroom, STEM laboratories, and libraries? And 3, where and how would your community use outdoor classroom facilities to teach global empathy and environmental stewardship? Now, with that, our Zoom moderator will organize us into breakout rooms for a more intimate conversation. When you received the Zoom link for this meeting, you were given a specific breakout room assignment. So we ask that you please select that room when the option pops up. Each group will have a champion, a reporter, and a scribe. And you'll be in your room for about 30 minutes, and then we'll come back together to report out to the larger group. We ask for those 3 questions that you spend roughly 10 minutes on each question. And to ensure that you get through all 3 questions, you will receive reminders at each 10-minute mark. All right. So again, the questions are: 1, how can corridors and cafeterias become adaptable, agile learning spaces? 2, what kinds of flexible furniture are needed to improve and focus communication in the classroom, STEM laboratories, and libraries? And 3, where and how would your community use outdoor classroom facilities to teach global empathy and environmental stewardship? So please select your breakout rooms. Take the time to really assess how these can be incorporated into the portrait of a graduate using our school facilities. All right, let's get moving. Thank you so much.
Does anybody have a master list of who's in what facility? I have no idea what group I'm supposed to be in. I didn't see it anywhere. Oh, there we go. Okay, somebody's asking me to join.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope everyone had a good experience in your breakout rooms. Well, I will give everyone a minute or 2 to see if we have everyone back in. All right. Well, again, thank you all so much for participating. We have 3 breakout groups, and what we'll do now is call on each group and have the scribe or the reporter kind of report out and talk about the findings from each one of your groups. So I will just go in numerical order, and let's call on group 1.
That, I believe, was our group. Hello to everyone. We actually did get through all 3 questions. For question number 1, as far as the corridors and cafeterias. Hallways would simply, our group, the consensus was, would need to be wider. If it's a new build, they obviously they've got to be designed wider or with with bump out spaces. If it's a current facility, that makes it a lot more difficult because the hallways are already there. You either got to move some walls or expand the building out if you're going to do something like that. So that becomes a bit more problematic. As far as a cafeteria or cafetorium is concerned, there the real question was you got to have it big enough to be flexible enough to be truly multi-purpose. We had one individual at Starling basically saying that the cafetorium just isn't big enough to do everything that they'd really like it to be able to do. So certainly, as if in any new structures, we've got to make sure that multi-purpose room is big enough so it can truly be multi-purpose. As far as flexible furniture is concerned, we talked about having actually in rooms having lofts if the ceiling is high enough so that students actually, if they needed an extra place to study or work on a project independently, they could go there and still do it within the space available. We also talked about the tables and chairs need to be very durable and on wheels, so that again and if they're tables, they need to be able to fit together in different ways. So either with lots of right angles or wedges, that something in an arc or circular shape just hasn't really worked in the facilities that have had them. And also, as far as tables are concerned, we need them to be variable height so that they will work not only for kids with disabilities or perhaps in wheelchairs, but also kids of different sizes. We have a diversity of sizes of young people, and especially in K-8 schools, you're looking at a huge difference between obviously an 8th grader and a kindergartner. Then finally, with outdoor spaces, one issue is that with weather, they may only be able to be occasionally used, but things we can do are have community gardens at schools, courtyards where we can build them in or maybe imaginatively construct them in. We need to have spaces that are as interactive as possible where kids can actually do learning, okay? And to do it the best we can, if not year round, at least as much of the year as possible. So more and different types of outdoor spaces. That concludes our report. Did I miss anything, folks?
I don't think so. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much for Group 1 for your report. We're going to move on to Group 2. If the scribe or the reporter would like to discuss some of the, we'll talk about some of the discussion in your group. About 2 minutes for Group 2.
Were we Group 2?
Well, you are now.
Okay, so we're Group 2. I'm co-opting the process, but no, we had a very meaningful and robust conversation, Lee, in regards to question 1. Some similar things as the first group, but tables, round tables that are family style that would help the discussion process with kids, so they're not all regimented in straight lines on these long cafeteria tables on these small little seats, chairs that are comfortable, flexible areas where kids can be in larger groups versus maybe smaller, or if they want to be alone. We have to remember that this is one of the only times in their day that they have downtime. They're go, 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 and all the work they're doing. So we want our cafeterias to be reflective and warm and welcoming places, as well as possibly ability to sit outside as it's connected to the cafeteria, atrium type thing. Possibly even, we had some discussions, we got pretty creative there, sitting on the floor, different seating, that type of thing. We even talked about some of the seating, I was in a new cafeteria where it had a long row and it was like a booth and restaurant, but yet there were tables on the side. So those types of things to help make it welcoming. Question number 2, as it related to flexible furniture and being able to focus the classroom STEM laboratories and libraries. Obviously, movable desks and tables. There's a discussion about these large glass windows and these open spaces where the teacher could have maybe be working with the main group, but in here there's a group working in a lab setting or just maybe even out in the hallway. So there's that line of sight type of vision. Ability for a STEM laboratory to be able to have project-based learning going on, kids spreading out, and our libraries need to become learning environments where traditionally it was come in, be quiet, you get a book, and that these spaces as well would be variable in terms of their flexibility and needs, in terms of the learning needs at the school. A very important point came up that our spaces need to match our student learning needs. So if a student might need some quiet, and it's what they need to function versus someone that might need the ability to move around, you know, the kinesthetics of things. We need to have that space for our kids to be able to do that, have that flexibility. So for question 3, we quite honestly were a bit confused with the connection between the empathy and the environmental stewardship. There was a discussion about wishing there are examples within the district already that some of that is happening at in terms of like the Lyndon McKinley Rain Garden or roof. There's many of our buildings have outdoor gardens. There's the nature preserve. I think, what was it? Scioto had the outdoor walking track. There was a discussion that, you know, this outdoor component might be SEL related, social emotional learning. Maybe that was something that would help our students, as well as 2 last things. Our buildings reflect the cultures where they come from. So not only just in terms of like hanging things up, but colors, murals, the decor. And then lastly, I've been charged, I'd be remiss if I didn't, if I mention what Vice President Reyes wanted. She wants a beach because she talked about Spain and how they're doing school at the beach. So Vice President Reyes, I got that plug in for you.
Thank you.
I love it. I love it. That's how we definitely increase tourism and bring more families back to the district. We have a beach. All right, group 3. Our spokesperson for group 3. We have flexible.
We were
classrooms.
actually in
have a
group 3, so I think you got to go back to 2.
Okay, so group 2.
Diana
Who
and Gina,
wants to top the beach?
did we have a scribe? I don't know that we took notes. Did anybody take notes?
Can you give us a summary?
I'll hit a couple points. One of the things we talked about was whether or not old buildings could be refurbished to become flexible and live up to this cultural change that is being envisioned. And we thought they probably could with some effort. And so we talked a lot about that, about possibly removing walls, adding flexible furniture, just being creative with existing spaces. Another topic that came up was the possibility that in order to facilitate all of these changes, it might be better to have schools be less populated than they are now and possibly have more facilities with fewer people instead of very large, highly populated buildings, just to create additional spaces. So that was, I know that's one thing. Does anybody, Gina, Diane, do you have anything else that sticks in your memory?
We also talked about just making sure that, I think Mr. Nelson mentioned also in his group, making sure that, Mr. Dobos, that the furniture suits the student and making sure the furniture suits the teacher's ability to be mobile. So what is a classroom? What furniture could we have that a teacher can be as mobile as a student? Also, in thinking about the learning styles of all of our students, incorporating things such as the pedals underneath some of the desks so that our kids are able to move while they're learning. Also looking at some of the buildings, as Mr. Nelson said, that we have Linda McKinley that has elements of some things that we would like. Starling does also. But if we have those spaces where we have the white walls, where kids are up and moving and a teacher's moving and learning happens on the walls, and are able to give immediate feedback to students, and students can be a community of learners moving together, learning from each other. And then thinking about outdoor spaces also. We were kind of challenged on the third question too, as Mr. Nelson had brought up, but then we moved into a conversation about what can learning look like outside, and that being yet another learning space. And could it be a temporary space? In what areas of our district could we create spaces that are permanent spaces that we could protect and also partner with the community as community partner learners, that a community comes into that outdoor space and they're also part of our classroom.
And Diane also brought up, why do teachers have desks?
Well, thank you. Thank you very, very, very much. It's a lot of great information and insightful information that came from each of the groups. Now, Gina, our family ambassador, Ms. Schwimmer, I don't think I said her last name right, but Ms. Gina, she was able to look at some of the notes that were taken and pop in and out of a few of the sessions. Was there anything, Gina, that popped out to you that stood out that maybe was not covered in any of these report outs?
Well, I was looking back through and only one of the three groups actually did a response. It was group technically 3 that did their response. So if group 1 and group 2 could still work on their responses, that would be super helpful. For my group, I started typing what you were talking about, Diane, so I'll finish typing it, so don't worry about that. But as far as covering everything, mostly everything was covered. I know something that we talked about is we love all of the ideas, but just trying to make it equitable in all of our schools. Some schools are a little more like conducive to some of these opportunities for their kids as far as like bigger spaces and movable furniture and things like that. So one of the questions we talked about is how would we make that so all of our schools have the same opportunities? Because as you know, some buildings are older, some are newer, some have bigger like spaces and hallways, some do not. But other than that, I think everything was pretty much covered. Really great ideas. I love to hear it. I was telling the group that I was in, it's like encouraging as a parent to like think about these different things and what the schools are thinking about. So I know other of you that are on here that have kids in the schools, no matter what grade they're in, your kids learn differently and in different environments. So just knowing that the district's thinking about these things is very encouraging, and hopefully assisting all of our students in all of our regions to be able to learn better and more equitable. So thank you.
Gina, you called two of the groups out as being deficient, that we didn't respond to something. What were we supposed to respond to? I thought we were just supposed to report out orally. Was there something written we were supposed to do?
Yeah, Misty shared a form and I'll reshare it. There was like a Google form for whoever the scribe was that had those three.
Why didn't somebody tell us?
Sorry about that, Dave. I just shared it in there. So if you could, since you shared or whoever had the information, if you could just type some of those responses out, it just helps us to keep all of the information together for each of the regions meetings that we have, so we can kind of put all of our ideas and make them all more cohesive.
I don't see a form, but I will type up notes and email them to Misty.
There, do you see the form now? I shared it again. In the chat box.
Okay, let me get to that.
And if you have time, that would be great. But if not, we appreciate your thoughts and I can jot some information down too. So
I'll get them to her one way or another. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Teamwork, teamwork. Thank you all so much. So, so again, all of the information that has been added and will be forwarded in the very, very near future will be incorporated into the into what we come up with for the facilities master plan for Columbus City Schools. So we want to thank you so much for participating and sharing your thoughts and ideas. So when is the next community conversation? The next community conversation will be on June 24th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. In June, we will discuss the remaining 3 pillars for the portrait of a graduate. The last 3 pillars of creativity, critical thinking, and technologies, which are the driving forces to define educational space in terms of quantity and quality. So we'll be looking at what do they look like? How do they feel? Some of the similar things that we have done tonight, as well as how will these things be integrated into the building and how will they be used? Once again, all of the comments from tonight and from the other 5 planning regions will be reviewed at the Facilities Planning Committee meeting. This review process will lead to future questions in upcoming surveys and discussion points in upcoming meetings. If you would like to watch that, that will be on Wednesday, May 26th at 6 p.m. You can tune in virtually as this meeting will be live streamed on the district's Facebook and YouTube page. So as in closing out, once again, thank you for all of your input. It is truly appreciated. Please look for a new survey for the Envision phase in the coming weeks as we all look forward to our next community discussion to review the remaining pillars of the portrait of a graduate later in June. Your input is greatly appreciated. Once again, for the 4th, 5th, and 6th time, thank you so much for participating. We hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Good night.
And keep smiling. You all have some beautiful smiles, so thank you.